I'm going to let everybody in. Welcome, everybody. Glad that you could be here with us. Nice to see your faces. And you all know me. I'm Rebecca. I'm the communications person. So thanks for joining us for our introductory session to level 2. We'll be here for about an hour, but we may go over a little over an hour to answer all questions at the end. So if you have questions and you can't go over for whatever reason, you can put them in the chat box and then they're there. And then first, you all know a lot about us at this point, but I want to share a little bit more about what we're working on right now and how some things have changed. So Round Sky is a worker-owned co-op, as you all know, and we train consultants, leaders who value inclusion and participation in their teams, and who are seeking to improve their democratic and collaborative processes. So in the last couple of years, we've really been focusing on the level 1 training, and we'll continue to offer about 2 to 3 times a year for new cohorts. But we've recently decided to strengthen our marketing and outreach efforts around the cooperative aspect of our business. So you may notice a slight shift in our framing, in our marketing and those kinds of things, and the things that we decide to focus on. And that's partly due to the training that I've been getting around cooperative businesses, and also us honing in more on who we are as a business. So you may see that. And this summer we're offering a few different workshops on decision making and strategic planning. So you may be interested in that, and we'll have special rates for you all as level 1 people. So keep your eye out for that. And we'll also continue to do webinars and things like that, and conferences and challenges. So you can look out for that. And you all are pretty familiar with Zoom, but just a few logistics. You can use the chat box at any time to say anything that you want. And I believe you know where that is. It's a little speaking bubble. And we'll have some breakouts in this time together. And also I'll be keeping people on mute because our mics are so good at picking up all the background sounds. If I mute you, it's not personal. And this call is being recorded, so we can share it with people who can't be here. So that's it from the logistical end. So I want to share a little bit more about me with you all, since, and now it's been a while for most of you that you've had a conversation. So I'll just share a little bit about myself. So I've been working with Round Sky for about 3 years now in July. And what brought me to this work was wanting to enter more fully into the worker co-op movement to gain a better understanding of what economic justice looks like for me, as I come from a fragmented class background. And I was really entrenched in nonprofit work and feeling not as jazzed about that. So I really wanted to work in something a little different. And I really wanted to talk about power in the workplace, and that wasn't happening where I was. So then I magically found Round Sky, and since then, I've done my own personal development. I've started a master's program, which some of you know about now, from my most recent blog, and that's on cooperative management and credit unions with St. Mary's. So I'm really excited about that and how that's impacting the way that we're doing it as a smaller co-op. So thank you again, everyone, for being here. I'm really excited for this conversation. It was really energizing last year when we had it, and I will let Cecile talk a little bit more about herself in the framework of today's call.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's so nice to see you all. I miss our regular times together, so really appreciating these moments together. And since I have the privilege of knowing all of you for some time now, I thought I'd share just a few details about myself and how I got to this work that you might not already know. So primarily my interest in research around power stemmed from a passionate search for an answer to our pressing global needs as humans. And everything, from toxic forms of leadership to our climate disorders, just so many reasons why it seemed that power was sort of at the center of a Venn diagram of all of these issues overlapping with each other. And the search was also grounded in my own personal experience of trauma as a child, but then also trauma inflicted a little bit later on in my life by my spiritual teacher of 18 years. So I've been with this community for 18 years. And she took such offense at a question I had for her around power that she excommunicated me on the spot. No discussion, no nothing, just gone. And that was obviously quite a shock, especially coming from someone that I had loved and trusted and spent quite a bit of time with for 18 years. And it really, raised this question of how these harms and many of the harms that we've experienced have come from individuals who were conscious, spiritual, evolved humans. And this discrepancy really highlighted the opportunity that we all have to understand and power, its use and distribution, and the obligation we have to deliver generative power no matter what. So CoLab really emerged from this legacy, my own personal legacy, our collective legacy of trauma, as a support tool to help retrain us all in a reliable method for generative power. So thank you all so much for your interest and your desire to continue this exploration for yourself and your communities.
Yeah, thanks, Cecile, for being here and bringing your full self. And I now want to give us time to introduce ourselves, or you all to introduce yourselves on the call, since some of you may know each other, but not everyone knows everyone. So if you could share your name and your work, whether it's organization or what you're passionate about right now, your city, the place that you live, and anything that's you're bringing, as well as why you're interested in continuing on. There may be some interesting connections between us. So I'm going to start at the top of my list here, which Brian, you're up first, if you're willing to start. I like that response. And I'm going to stop this screen share so we can really see each other better. Nice. Okay.
Hi, I am in Lexington, Mass, as it says in my little square here. I did the Winter Spring Collab 1 with Annalise. Hello, Annalise. Great to see you ladies all. I am I've worked in business development, sales, and marketing for 25 years and have an interest in the leadership space, coaching space, and trying to develop some new skills. I have an interest in communication and have been studying a couple of different modalities of communication. And right now I'm working part-time in a retail store and trying to generate some other avenues to pursue. And I've enjoyed CoLab, and I'm still working on the material, trying to assimilate it into a cogent article. So that's what's up for me right now.
Welcome. Thanks for being here. And next up is Annalise.
Hi, I'm Annalise Lemon. I'm located in Austin, Texas. Hi, Brian. I work as a co-op developer, and so I help people start co-ops and make their co-op businesses better and stronger. And I'm also working with a nonprofit in the Austin area to really build a new nonprofit entity that specifically supports worker-owned co-ops and housing co-ops, as sort of with a focus on really wealth building for people that don't traditionally have access to business and homeownership. And really I'm here today because CoLab Level 1 was so immediately impactful on my work. I was able to apply what we learned like the day after we discussed it in class and see results quickly with the groups who I work with. I facilitate lots of meetings for lots of different groups. And so this was all very applicable. And I'm interested to take some time with y'all today and think about what Level 2 might look like.
Awesome, thanks. Thanks for being here. And Lisa, you're up next, if you will. You're muted, sorry. I may have muted you.
Control of the mutiness, so I just assumed you unmuted me when you said my name. My name's Lisa, and I'm hanging out right now on the North Shore of Massachusetts, and it's actually a glorious day here, and I think spring is actually taking, and we're going to have a summer maybe eventually, but I'm in no hurry there. What I bring with me is cat rearing. So I have a new kitten, and I have 2 adult male cats and a new little girl cat. And she has just tired all 3 of us out today. So I'm completely tired out. Everybody's very needy. So if a cat climbs through the camera, I'm just going to let the cat climb through the camera. And that's what's happening as we adjust to our new family dynamics. I work with Intentional Peer Support as the administrative manager, and Chris and I just finished the Collab 1. And we're still working on bringing a lot of that on board, but it feels like to really suss out what will be best utilized within our organization as we move from our current framework to more of a collaborative framework is to really dive into the deep end of the 7 conversations. So that's why I'm here, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about what all of that is.
Nice. Thanks for
And I just want to say thank you for the shout out around power, because it's like my favorite topic.
You're in good company.
Yeah.
And your kitten or the other cats that want to join, that's totally fine. Free education for them.
Thank you. They're not big into sharing power right now, I got to tell you.
Okay. Good to know. And Ellie, would you go next? Oops. I'll unmute you if that helps. Oh,
figured it out. I'm on my
There
phone,
you go.
so it was a little bit less intuitive.
Okay.
All right. Hi, guys. I'm Ellie. I am sitting in Montpelier, Vermont at Hunger Mountain Co-op, which is a food cooperative. We've been in business since 1972, so we have a lot of cooperative and a lot of historical stuff, some of that around power and hierarchy and communication and all those lovely issues that you go get with people working together. So I finished Collab level 1, changed my life like many of us have already expressed, and I can't see not going next to level 2. Like, there's not another option. Because I believe in this kind of all voices at the table, inclusiveness kind of way of doing things. So that's me. Hi.
Welcome.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. And Chris.
Yeah, it works really well.
Yeah.
Hey, so thank you. I'm Chris. I'm up here in Burlington, Vermont. So waving to Ellie, not too far away, and Cecile. Although if you're thinking that does not sound like a Vermont accent, I'm from New Zealand originally. So I'm currently working as the director of intentional peer support with the intent of converting to cooperative structure. In intentional peer support, we grew out of what we call the psychiatric survivor movement. So we work right on the edge of where sort of mental health, community development, and human rights intersect. And there's a lot of power challenging. And so I'm really keen to implement and demonstrate that in all aspects of how we work. and also, you know, our organization, my values have been to be sustainable, accessible, and evolving. And you know, this is very much part of the intent to be evolving, and involving. Yeah, and Collab 2 seemed like, you know, like a logical next step, and I'm delighted to have Lisa on board as well, because certainly it's enormous assistance to me to be doing this collaboratively, and not alone. So that's me.
Nice. Welcome. Thank you, everyone. And I just wanted to share that in the chat box, you can message each other if you'd like to connect for something piqued your interest. Feel free to do that if you want to do that privately. And so I want to pass it back to Cecile that will give us an overview and then jump right into it.
All right. Well, lovely to hear from each of you again, and thank you so much for your interest in collaborative leadership. Today we're going to start with talking about the question of power and how it translates into Collab 7 conversations. We'll also spend a little time exploring some scenarios of how Collab works in real life to convert toxic power to healthy power, before we move into how the level 2 really enables leaders to integrate these tools and all the other course details that might be of interest to you. So we'll leave time at the end of our call together for any further questions and comments that you might have. And on that note, let's just dive right in. And thank you, Rebecca, for making the slides move. I appreciate that. So power, right? Big topic. It's been defined in so many ways over the centuries by philosophers, autocrats, religious authorities, you name it. Really every single one of us, because this is something that is so real and practical, impacts our daily lives. Every one of us has some kind of a definition, even if it's pretty implicit. But what's clear is that our personal collective ways of exploring definitions of power really enable us to reclaim both the term and therefore the territory. And, you know, as you guys remember from level 1, what I discovered in my research is that the most broad definition of power that I could find, the one that's up on the slide, the force of enactment, was the most helpful. And beginning with that most encompassing definition, articulating the 4 types of power that exist all the time when we're working together, was transformative. One of the strengths of mapping power as a force that can be used well or poorly is that it really helps us to understand the steps that go into creating healthy and or toxic power. The trouble with toxic power, of course, that it's very difficult to change, and having the steps of how we get to toxic power laid out means that we can construct remedial action and head down a different path. Without being able to see the mechanics of toxic power, we are held hostage by it. So since we've already explored the definitions together of all these poles in level 1, I want to take a moment to explore what I mean by toxic power using the power matrix and how that gets remediated using Collab 7 conversations. So at least 2 forms of toxic power become visible using the power matrix lens. Let's start with autocratic power. And notice the relationship to the term autonomous power, right? These 2 things are not the same. Autonomous power is a value-neutral term relating to the choice of any individual entity, whereas autocratic power is the power that comes from using that force of enactment to determine a course of action in situations where the entities impacted by that action or decision are not considered or consulted. Essentially, the collective input is bypassed in order for one person or one entity to have their way despite the consequences. So Wikipedia uses a nice definition. Autocracy is a system of government in which supreme power is concentrated in the hands of one person whose decisions are subject neither to external legal nor regularized mechanisms of popular control. And the consequence of autocratic power is often harm to one or more entities. And we simply need to look around us and look at our history books to see what that leaves in its wake. The second form of toxic power arises from the opposite pole, what I call collectocratic power. Now, collectocratic power is that power that comes from using the force of enactment as a collective to determine a course of action for an individual entity where their autonomous power is bypassed. So, for example, laws around abortion are made by the collective to supplant the individual's ability to choose for themselves what will happen with their own body. And it's interesting to me that the power matrix illumined the fact that collectocratic power exists, even though it is a new word, it does not exist in the dictionary, and there is no common understanding of it, even though there is a common experience of it, right? But that gap between our ability to articulate what's happening and do something about it is very real with collectocratic power. So first step, making things explicit, making visible, shining a light on it, creating common understanding, a common discourse. And the next step is unpacking the mechanics of these kinds of power, seeing how they function, constructing new ways of functioning. And the Collapse 7 conversation is the result of unpacking those mechanics of both toxic and healthy power. And the practices are one set of solutions that enable organizations to sort through their problematic situations and create healthier ways of being together. So I'd love to hear actually from each of you, or any of you that are willing to sort of step forward if you have had an experience with collectocratic power. I'd love to hear some details about what happened and what your experience of it was like. So just let's see, is there a way to unmute everyone, or just let's see, raise your hand if you know how to do that, or just unmute yourself if you have something to say. Yeah, there we go. Ellie, you're up.
You saw me unmute. Yeah, I see collectocratic power present often in a couple of different places, I guess. I mean, I'd be careful about saying it too loudly here, so if you have trouble hearing me, but I am at work, so I'm going to be careful about this. But I see it in working in a union environment, the collectocratic power that comes often when we come from a positions-based negotiating, I guess, when we come from a place of wanting to make sure our voice is the loudest to insert behind a guise of the common good, supposedly. So seeing collectocratic power present not just on, various forms of leadership. And I also see that I'm part of a board, a school board at my daughter's school, who is implicit collectocratic power, which is an interesting place to work with people of tenure who started the school, see a real, I don't know that they can identify it themselves, but they have a bias towards their own decision-making as being sort of the end all. And we all subscribe to that in some ways. So those are two examples of collectocratic power being present in my experience. And now I'm going to mute.
Thanks, Ellie. That was great. Anyone else inspired to share their experience?
Yeah, I live in co-housing, and that has all sorts of interesting dynamics. I resonated with Ellie, you talking about the people who started the organization sort of having some implicit power, and that certainly happens in our organization. And another way that I see this happening is, and that we're actively working to sort of move through and find some other dynamics to address, is in the notion that everybody needs to be involved in every decision. And if they're not, they sort of throw, a grown-up's version of a tantrum, and can block decisions, and so those are a couple of examples of that that I'm sort of intricately involved with.
Thank you. Those are some great examples. It's actually a complex combination in the co-housing between collectocratic and autocratic power, people who are using that ability to block, right, just because they are pissed, right? They're having a hissy fit. Yeah. No, thank you. All right. Well, let's take a look at how the 7 conversations work with these forms of power, toxic power. And the first way that the 7 conversations works is similar to the power matrix. We're essentially making things explicit, visible. We're bringing into transparency the conversations and their outputs that all organizations already have. And this is a very simple and very subtle action that takes the conversations that are being concentrated in either an autocratic or a collectocratic manner and puts them on the table, right? And it puts them on the table within reach of everyone who is impacted by those decisions. So impacted directly, I would, if they're in that scope of work, they need to be at the table. It also clarifies that all of these conversations are being held throughout the conversation, throughout the organization, perhaps in smaller portions, in subscopes or contents that nests inside larger content. But nevertheless, it makes evident that these conversations are really required in every scope. And in those 2 simple things, making things explicit and transparent and accessible to people who are impacted, and then also making clear that every scope needs to be having these conversations to some degree, it eliminates the stronghold of both autocratic and collectocratic power by taking away their implicit right to have those conversations behind closed doors. And the easiest way to do this is to start with a problem an organization is having and use the 7 conversations lens to analyze what's happening, to point to the harm that's being caused, and by the way that those conversations are currently being held. So let's dig in a little more specifically. I'd love to ask for any of you who feel inspired to share an example from a recent organizational situation where power was being misused, and let's sort of digest those together as to what was going on specifically with the 7 conversations and how that relates to implicit, explicit, autonomous, or collective power. So anyone inspired to take either one of those examples you already raised or to bring another one forward. And just a situation from your own experience, doesn't have to be big or catastrophic, just anything.
I can't stand the silence.
Thank you, Brian.
So our Treasury Secretary is trying to exert some power to hold on to tax information from our president. I wonder if that would be an example to work.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, say a little bit more, including things like, what the context is, why they might be doing that, what they think they're going to get from it, and how the conversation is unfolding in the organization about that.
Yeah. I'm not as deeply steeped in the backstory to all of this. Mm-hmm. Let me identify what I do know is that the man who's in charge of all of the money in the country and all the banks and tax information is protecting the president by saying that information is not going to be revealed. And that is an abuse of power. And there are other forces, Congress, not certain who else is making it clear to him that he will be in trouble if he continues on this path. I don't know if that fully
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I didn't realize when you first introduced it that you were talking about our whole country. So yeah, thank you. That helps. And it does seem sort of that the treasurer is using their autocratic power to override the desire, the health and well-being, essentially, of the rest of the country and frankly Congress to try to preference the outcomes and on behalf of Trump, right? So it is this really interesting combination of both autocratic and collectocratic power, and then we clearly have the collective power of our Congress saying, hey, hang on a minute, you can't do that, you don't have that, that's not within your autonomous power to do that, and you're trying to claim that turns it into autocratic power where you're pushing your decision down on other people who are impacted by it.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you.
That's what I meant to say.
That was great. Thank you. Anyone else feel inspired? All right. Well, thank you for that example, Brian. And as you guys know, in level 1, we learned the basics of the standard meeting practice and some details around the governance and operations conversations. But the reality is that if we were going to take, say, a complex organizational situation, and you are faced with having to resolve it, you are in a position to help support the resolution of that, there's some skill that's required to be able to change those power dynamics into generative ones. And typically it takes time, right? It's not going to happen all at once. And so there's a sort of ongoing need to be able to access the full spectrum of the 7 conversations, be able to identify them, explain them to other people, understand how to prioritize them. Like, do we have the business model conversation before we have the interpersonal one, or vice versa? Or what if we're dealing with a lack of clear strategy? Do we have that conversation before we create roles, or vice versa? And so there's a need to be able to understand the sequencing of the conversations, as well as how to adapt them to the particulars of your organization. Some organizations are going to want those super quick and dirty strategy conversations. Others are going to want to, take 7 months to come up with it, and to do lots of the sort of additional work behind the scenes in terms of fleshing out what our strategy really is. So being able to articulate, understand your situation and offer solutions that really fit that unique situation is what level 2 sort of sets you up to get to, and to be able to create those generative outputs over the long run. And so you are really at the beginning of integrating these life-changing tools. And in level 1, you learned what Collab tools are, the basics, but the implementation process is a whole other level of complexity. And that's really what I see level 2 as, is it's an implementation intensive. And so during this course, you're going to learn how to initiate each of the 7 conversations with Collab's tools and processes. You'll understand how to put to use which tool when. You'll gain that confidence to teach all of the participatory processes to get those clear process-driven results for your teams. You'll also learn how to facilitate complex tensions on the spot. So you've got a tension that comes in that's 2 or 3 different conversations. You'll learn how to identify, sort that out, and be able to incrementally move that forward. You'll also develop and evolve an implementation plan for at least one organization, more than that if you want to, and be able to use my support and the insights of your peers, which are frankly one of the gems of level 2, is just that we get to be in this intensive learning environment with each other for 9 months, which is a significant period of time. And the insights that everyone has is, can be really just stunning and super supportive. And of course, the interpersonal relationships that we develop with each other over 9 months is profound and rich, and a big plus that of the former level 2 students have named. Also, you get to deepen more your ability to use your body as a resource for remaining centered and focused in the face of conflict, confusion that we will inevitably face in this work. And we get to use these tools for abstraction and information gathering to place yourself as an instrument of change, develop yourself and your own capacity to become a facilitative leader in any environment that you choose to step into. So those are some of the things you get from level 2. And Rebecca, I just want to pause briefly and see, does it make sense to do the breakout that we had planned at this point or not, given the time? What do you think?
I think that we should.
Great.
Yeah.
So then, off to you to lead us into that.
Awesome. So we're going to do it's going to be quicker than we had planned, but we're going to do a breakout of 2 to 3 people each group. And if you could just kind of explore the question about where you are personally in the process of integrating these tools and processes, and where do you see yourself going? How do you see that evolving in your personal leadership journey? So, and it looks like Samantha has said she's not gonna be able to join a breakout group. So if you're in a group with her, it's a little bit automated, just kind of know that she's not participating. And welcome here, wherever you are. And let's see.
And Rebecca, is there a way to have the person who ends up with Samantha come back to the main room with us or not?
Possibly.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens. If you end up by yourself, just take a few minutes to do that, reflecting for yourself on where you are personally and where you want to go, where you see yourself going with these tools.
And you should have an invitation. You have 2 to 3 people in your group. Great.
Awesome.
Welcome, Samantha. I'm assuming you're in transit or something, but you get to listen to Cecile and I chat for a moment.
or join the conversation if you can. Mm-hmm. Are you able to unmute? All right, I'm going with no, yeah. Which is fine. Just want you to feel welcome if that's an option.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so oh, you try. Oops. Okay. Only able to listen in. If you would like me to unmute you, you can chat that. I think I might be able to do it. When there's like time for questions or those kinds of things, or if you want to enter in our conversation, that's fine too. How much time should we give them? Like 4 minutes?
Yeah, and we might want to send a little note to make sure both folks in the partnering have had a chance to chat.
Okay. I'll send a broadcast. Okay.
Nice. Thanks,
that
Rebecca.
example of Trump. Did not know that that's what he meant also
Yeah.
at first, which is such a universal, I think the whole world at this point basically knows the trauma that Trump is fostering, facilitating,
enabling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely one of the key tools, I think, in the fascist toolbox. Create trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
A lot less space to resist or to think about what kind of change could happen if you're in a state of trauma.
Exactly.
Not impossible, of course,
no,
but definitely weighs down.
Yep. Yeah. And one of the breakout sessions at the Root Skills Conference this past weekend was on trauma, and I found it really just sort of encouraging and helpful to walk through just the conversation about it and the acknowledgement of how ubiquitous trauma is, right? We all have had it, we've all faced it. And then also laying it on the table is really helpful, but it also, at least cognitively helps people build a little more empathy for each other, right? That, if we're walking in with the assumption that we all have something that's, been traumatizing, then that's a different place to come from. But then towards the end of the workshop, they were talking about how both accessible some of the tools for working with trauma are, and that we don't have to sort of fall prey to the assumption that if trauma has sort of impacted us sufficiently that it's interfering with our our basic needs, that doesn't have to interfere with our higher order needs and their evolution, right? And so those higher order needs are essentially required, I think, in order to craft effective responses to toxic situations. And so, I found it encouraging to just sort of underscore the fact that we don't have to let trauma take us down.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, to some extent it's going to, and I think it's important to validate and acknowledge that and work with that, but we don't have to stay there, right? Locked in.
It's not the end.
Right.
It's not the last chapter, or it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
It sounds like a really rich conversation.
It was. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back. There are 12 seconds left for the other group, but I want to ask if there's anything that came up for you that felt surprising, or some commonalities that came out of it, or like, oh, this was something that many of us were experiencing or can resonate with. So welcome back, Ellie and Lisa. So just wanting to open up the floor for anything surprising or commonalities that you experienced in your conversation, and anything you want to share with the larger group that came out of the conversation. Just kind of popcorn style, unmute yourself when you are ready.
Continuing the work of learning these processes so I don't need a book. So I can call upon it in my own practice and experience. Yeah. That's what I'm going for here.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah, I think in our group, we really, we've all been implementing to one extent or another the standard meeting practice and the ops tracking and roles and scopes. And so I think we're all feeling like that's incomplete, feeling like that's not the whole picture, and we're running into things where we want the other pieces. So
nice.
Absolutely.
For us, I'm hoping that the continued investigation of the framework will offer us a really distilled way to move through processes that we've wanted to move through for several years now, and kind of give us a focused way to do that.
Nice.
Great. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thanks for sharing, everybody, or for sharing with yourselves and sharing with the larger group. So I want to take some time to share more of the details of the training. We kind of gone into like how this works with examples and exploring where those gaps are and what level 2 covers in some ways in this very hands-on approach. And I want to share the details. So I'm pretty sure I've told all of you at some point that I like to think of level 1 as 2 different tracks of personal development and the hard skills, the hard management tools, so soft and hard skills, for lack of a better term. And level 2 really does the same thing. There's many different tracks, but I like to think of that also as in 2 tracks for level 2. So the heart of it is really an implementation intensive around the 7 conversations. So we'll be going through the details of each of those practices, each of the 7 conversations and those processes, along with the theory that supports those, and really kind of unveiling some of the behind the scenes work so you have a fuller picture. And you'll be taking your team through these practices and then reporting back, similar to level 1, but around the 7 conversations. And the format is really, the idea is that you'll incrementally bring collab into your organization as that works for you. So because it's 9 months, you have some flexibility about when you bring in which conversation, which can be really helpful. You don't have to force things on your team talking about purpose right now when you don't need to, that kind of thing. And by the end of the course, you'll be able to recognize when tensions come up, and which conversation they connect to, and how to bring your team through a full version of that or a shortened version that may just be good enough for now to meet the needs and the amount of time that you have. And then to take a longer version when that's appropriate. So I want to show you where you can get some of the nitty-gritty details on the informational page. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm not going to go through each of them because it's a lot of information and it's available to you, so you can check it out when you would like. So we'll leave some more time for some of the information that's not on here, but this is you all have been on this page because you signed up for this call, but if you scroll down, you'll see what you'll learn in the level 2 collab training. So there's these 4 sections. So you can read through these, understanding the cycle of change and diving into your personal development, putting into practice the full spectrum of sharing power and implementation. So you can read each one and it will give you a good picture of what we cover in that course. And you can apply there, of course. And then there's some more information on here as well, if you'd like to look at that. But like I said, I'm not going to dive into each of those, but I just wanted to share where is a good spot for you to look. I'm going to stop. I'm going to keep sharing, but I'm going to change it to the slides. So I want to offer some of the top highlights and like the top differences between level and level 2, or the deepenings, not differences, the deepenings between level 1 and level 2. So in level 1, you focused on the big picture through the basic theory of power and how to implement the standard meeting practice and the understanding that there are these 7 conversations. And in level 2, we'll give you some of that theory, the key points of theory that informed collab, and also maps to understand how to adapt those practices in action without losing the benefits. So really fill in where those gaps that some people mentioned a little bit earlier, that you want the fuller picture. And in level 1, we really focus on intentional grounded leadership, and that's why we had our personal development topic, as well as the somatic practice. work in level 1. And then in level 2, we take a really good amount of time into diving into personal development practices in all of these different modules of what personal development looks like. So whether it's a lightning round and a fuller picture, how to give feedback in your team, that's what you'll dive into in level 2. So it's a larger part of it. And we'll also look into integral lenses and the theories of change, which inform the personal development practices. So you'll get that background understanding of what's happening there as well. And to continue on, so level 1 focused on strengthening collective decision-making and the skills for facilitating the standard meeting practice. And then level 2, we focus on those 7 conversations, but also how to set your team up for what outcomes need to come out of that. What outcomes need to come out of a purpose conversation, out of business model conversations, what brainstorming, scenario building, facilitating a strategy process that includes prioritization and setting those targets, which informs your operations conversation that we discussed in level 1. So there's a lot going on there and how they interrelate. So in level 2, we focus on what are the outputs and the outcomes of each of those conversations, so you know when you've been successful for now. And then in level 1, we introduce the standard meeting practice, like I just said. And also, in level 2, we deepen that by embedding these practices in. So it's not just the book, but it's really integrated into your organization and has the opportunity to really flourish. So there's a learning curve in learning collab that many organizations experience. And so level 2 helps you to kind of get over that learning curve and really get the juicy parts of it. So it's a different language, really, in some ways. So in some of the logistics, the course will be about 3 to 7, the cohort will be about 3 to 7 people. And Cecile mentioned earlier that is 9 months, so there are 30 sessions. We meet online via Zoom, and we'll have alternating weeks with the whole group session and then smaller group work around personal development to get a little bit deeper into that, and alternating weeks. And we've integrated breaks throughout the 30 weeks of the session. So it's not every single week, but it's 4 on, 1 off, basically. And the holidays kind of shift that as well. So you'll get time to really integrate and catch up if you have harder weeks in your work. And they're set up similar to level 1, where you practice facilitating and scribing for each session, and you'll have a course platform, you'll have forums to dive in when there's not, when you want to get a little bit deeper into things outside of the course sessions. And you can expect to spend about 4 to 6 hours a week, including for each week at a time. So no problem. Brian, nice to see you. Just sent a message. And so next, there will be an exam as well that will take you through what you've learned, similar to level 1, but really piecing out your knowledge of how to know and how to solve issues that come up in the team, complex issues, to break them apart and to share your understanding, and that will help us support you at the end if there's things that you need more support on. So there's a rigorous exam, and that really allows you to see what you've learned over the 9 months, which I think is pretty amazing. And some important dates. The last applications are due July 1st, but we have early bird applications due June 1st, so next week. And that gives you a $500 scholarship and like a thank you from us for committing early. And we're planning to start this the week of August 12th. Although we did want to, for those who are interested, have a little bit of flexibility on if there's a later week or an earlier week in August that works for the final cohort. So if that specific week doesn't work for you, we're flexible. We're going to try to work with our team similar to the scheduling. And so after 30 weeks, that will leave you around the week of April 20th. And in terms of the cost, it's $37.50, and we've done payment plans, as many of you know on this call. If you're in Vermont, VSAC does fund at least $2,500 of this, depending on your financial situation. And we are working on getting scholarships, and we have internal scholarships as well. So if price is an issue, please don't let that stop you from applying and starting the conversation of how we can support you. And we also have a referral policy. So if you know people who might be interested in level 1, 20% of their paid tuition goes towards yours. So if they happen to be able to pay $2,500 for level 1, that $500, that 20%, $500 goes towards your level 2, which is pretty great for everyone all around, in my opinion. And so that's a snapshot of the details of what the highlights are and the deepenings. So I'll stop there. And I'm sure there might be some questions brewing, so this is the time to ask them. We have a few that people asked beforehand, but I want to open up to the people who are right here if you have any burning questions first. Okay, great. I thought I saw some movement on the mute button. So one question that people asked beforehand was, so the question was, during the course, will you share more details about your real world experiences with implementing collab in different company cultures? So I want to pass that to you, Cecile, if you're willing to share.
Yeah.
What's that like in the course?
Yeah, it's actually one of the super rich parts of it. Both my sharing my experience of bringing collab into different organizational environments to illustrate what we're learning, but also each of you are going to be coming back with your own experiences and questions. And so we got that sort of extended over time insight viewpoint into each of your organizational environments, which is a super rich way to learn. All of us really benefit from that. So from several different angles, we get lots of real life exposure.
Nice. That brings up for me in my master's program, something I'm learning about is the importance of innovation in organizations, that actually having a history as a company is not as important as being super innovative. And Amazon apparently changes their coding every 11 seconds on their website in some way, which means that they're very agile and they're able to make decisions quickly. And I think that this real world application of collab and this ability to shift things at any given moment, shifting strategy, having that conversation, knowing that that's what's being asked, and being really clear about roles is the collaborative advantage of being innovative. That ability to do those things very quickly and have this experience as the people doing the work, I think, is our advantages. I think everyone on here is now a part of a cooperative, or to be. So that's something that I've been able to connect, which is really interesting, just to add that in. And another question that someone had sent me before was, if we work on teams that don't use or need a business model and strategy, do you have alternatives to that or ways to practice that if that conversation isn't happening or isn't needed? I'm assuming like on a volunteer board.
Yeah, right. That's a great example. So yes, certainly the benefit of being able to bring your particulars forward is that we get to brainstorm together how it's going to fit your current environment and what level of depth to go to, what some of the breakdown of internal conversations needs to be for that particular team. But one of the biggest transformational pieces I've seen from former students is coming in assuming that you don't have a business model or strategy, and because you're a volunteer team or whatever, and finding that that indeed there is a business model and the need for strategy is super important, and being able to bring those forward and at the level of depth that's appropriate for your context is exactly what we sort of walk through together. And then you get to go out and try it and come back with further questions. But that ability to adapt to a wide range of organizations is a lot of what we spend time on in level 2.
Great, thanks. Well, we're at an hour. I just want to open up the lines if anything came up logistically or specifically questions that are brewing for you.
I've got a question. I'm looking at the cost and thinking it's just going to be prohibitive for us to do more than one person because of the amount of time that that we also have to spend in between times. And I'm wondering if there are ways to book people or something like that, or are there other sort of creative ways to be able to do this? I've found it enormously helpful to have Lisa she's got a really great sort of strategic mind, and it's been great. I'd love to sort of think creatively about how to do this in ways that we'd be able to navigate.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we should definitely start that. I would love to have both of you, especially knowing that that's supportive for your implementation. So we should, I say, propose something to us about like what would work for you. And when that starts the conversation, I can't say we'll say yes to the first one, or I'm not sure where your organization is in terms of funding that, but we can start there. Mm-hmm. And the referral policy might be a place that's super helpful. I know that I believe that you posted in the Intentional Peer Support Facebook group.
I did.
And we got a number of applications. So people are interested. For whatever reason, those people didn't work out. But I think that intentional peers want these kind of resources. So I think
so you got a number of inquiries from our post? I
believe so. I don't know where else the 3 intentional peer people would come from.
Oh, nowhere else.
Nowhere else. So,
well, I don't know, possibly multiple, but if they said they were involved with intentional peer support, that would have been the source. So, yeah.
So I think that direction will also be a really a great resource, if that's something that you're willing to continue to do.
Sure.
Or to connect.
Yeah, I think the gist of that is just that we'd love to have you, and we'll work with you, and we'll find some way to put it together.
Sure, sure. Yeah. I mean, it's also, like 4 to 6 hours a week. Whoa, that's a whack of time. And, Lisa only works sort of up to half time. And so, it's her time as well as paying her for her time and paying me, as well. So it's all of that as well. So
just one thing to keep in mind is that two of those 4 to 6 hours are course time, and so that makes sense. But the rest of the time is actually your application of this material to your environment, to your team. And so it's work that you need and would already be paying yourselves for.
Good point.
I was wondering if y'all might have 1 or 2 people from previous level 2 courses who would be open to just like having a conversation about it and answering some questions. I appreciate all the information here. It's just a different perspective.
Absolutely.
That would be really valuable as, in thinking about whether now is the right time for me to do that.
Yeah, great. Yes, we do. And I will, we'll take a next action to send those out to everyone in case there's other folks who would like that.
Thank you.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
There was also another cooperative developer in the last level too. So
yeah, Jeanette.
She's in level 1. She just finished level 1.
In the last level 2.
But
Gotcha.
in the level 2 that just completed, so you may be interested in with Noemi, you may be interested in.
Oh yeah, I don't know her personally, but I've seen her on calls.
Right.
Yeah, that would be great.
Cool. Great.
Oh. Well, I was just going to say I'm happy to make personal introductions too. So I wasn't quite sure how to figure that out in my head, but I guess we'll send out the names and numbers, contact info, and if you want a personal introduction, just email me back and I'll make that happen.
Okay, thanks, Cecile.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the call with us. It was great to have you and to see you all. And I'm excited for whatever comes next in your work with us or work in the world. So thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming, everyone. It's great to see your faces.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good one.
All right. Bye.